Everyone. Thank you for joining me here on the Royal House of Ra. I am your host, Amenhotep Khufu El Ra, and tonight's show is episode 9, Dynasty 3. So I will be discussing about Dynasty 3 and its impact that it made throughout the Kemetic history. Before we go through that, I just want to read this part because this is before uh, Dynasty 3. This is episode 8 was Dynasty 2. Now, Dynasty 2 began in a period known as the first Pharaohs. The early dynastic period was which was between 3150 BC to 2686 BC, and that encompasses of the Dynasty 0, Dynasty 1, and Dynasty 2. Okay? Now, let me just read that part from that dynastic period to give you an understanding and then go on to Dynasty 3. Okay, so excuse me. The emergence of civilization in the Nile Valley at the end of the fourth millennium BC was the effect in one way or another, not only in following 3,000 years of Kemetan history, but also many of the sequent civilizations of the ancient Near East. Prior to the date, prehistoric people had roamed the river swamps and the high desert gibbles, but why suddenly should Kemetan's civilization erupt almost like the lotus flower from the primeval waters in one of the old creation legends, and where did it come from? The full answer to these questions have yet to be found. Arguments still range as to the origins of the first kings. Were they from Central Africa or what was later to be known as the Fertile Crescent? What historical thought later sources there are all seem agree that the first kings came from this an area somewhere near Abydos in Middle Kemet and were called the Thinite kings. Whatever their origin, they had the foresight and the power to match it to mold the first two dynasties. Such is the gap in time that we can only speculate in many instances on the political and economic situations and high level of technology, artistic achievement, and religious awareness, which within about 500 years laid down many of the concepts that were to govern later, though in ancient Kemet. Okay, so that is the beginning of the first dynasties. Okay, from Dynasty 0, which was uh, the Scorpion King Anumar was part of that. From Dynasty 0, Dynasty 1, which was Ha, who was the head of the first dynasty, and then you had in Dynasty 2, you had um, Hotep Sekhemre, who was head of the third dynasty. So this is a period from 3150 BC to 2686 BC. And this was known as the dynastic period, or the first beginning of the dynastic period. Now, I also had discussed about the pre-dynastic period, going into how Kemet had grown during the pre-dynastic period. How did they develop? Because during the pre-dynastic period, uh, the foundations of Kemet started there, as towards creating a writing language, creating pastoral, farming, tool making, the understanding of creating a civilized civilization started from the pre-dynastic period. Language and government and economy started. They had started trading with other nations in the pre-dynastic period. They didn't start trading with other nations only in the dynastic period age. They started pre-dynastic first before they went on to before they had done any type of trade with any other nation. So they, during ancient Kemet, they were pretty much on a global scale, not as big as they became under the dynastic period, but the start of their global reach started in pre-dynastic Kemet. Okay, and they, a lot of people believe that the governments didn't happen until dynastic period. No, they had governments. That Kemet was just divided into little chieftains and small little settlements and small little like city states. Then as it grew and it formed itself, then they had merged into a state. And then they had, when Nummer came and he left from lower Kemet and went down into upper Kemet and unite the two lands and created the Kemet as we know. So what I wanted to do is go into this further. Now, what we're discussing today is the Dynasty III. Now, Dynasty III is part of the dynastic period from Dynasty III to Dynasty VI. And that period is known as the pyramid builders. The pyramids was being created during that time, during those dynastic periods from the third dynasty to the sixth dynasty. More so a little bit later in that dynastic period, I think between the fourth and sixth, but it started in the third with the smaller pyramids, and then it elevated to the great pyramids as you see of Giza. So this was during the building age, the creation of the civilization as towards technology, science, mathematics, astrology, advanced economy, stronger centralized government, military developments, and a agriculture development and trading with further other nations outside of Kemet. So this is where Kemet started going into its golden age. All right, so this is the pyramid builders, and this is considered the old kingdom. So Dynasty 3, Dynasty 4, Dynasty 5, Dynasty 6 is part of the old kingdom. And the old kingdom started between 2686 BC to 2181 BC. Okay, so during the old kingdom, Kemetan civilization really came to age. The power of Egypt expanded considerably through the four dynasties it comprised, primarily due in large part to the increasing civilization of government and the creation of an efficient administrative system. The concept of kingship changed to with greater emphasis being placed on the divine nature of the office. The king was considered to be the incarnation of Horus, and from the fifth dynasty, son of the sun god Re. At the same time, the advances begun in previous centuries. In building technology, hieroglyphics, which would be the metanetu, and writing and artistic representations reached new heights in the Old Kingdom, nowhere more clearly than in the spectacular program of pyramid construction, which reached its apogee in the Fourth Dynasty. Dozier's Step Pyramid at Saqqara, the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza, and the famous Sphinx, thought to represent the Fourth Dynasty king Khafre, are among some of the most remarkable structures in the world. This prosperity could not be sustained, however, and the Sixth Dynasty saw the decentralization of power and an increase in the might of local officials. The Old Kingdom ended around 2181 BC in political fragmentation and anarchy. So this is the time, like I just mentioned before, the time when Kemet became a major and significant power. It started during the Old Kingdom period. Now, its development of power, as I mentioned before, started from the pre-dynastic. Then it went from the pre-dynastic to the early dynastic period. And then it went from the early dynastic period into the Old Kingdom period, where they had created great architecture, structure, administrative, religious formation, government, science, mathematics, you name it, they had created it, and they further advanced the society from this period of the Old Kingdom. Now, the dynasties, as I mentioned, from the Old Kingdom is from the Third Dynasty to the Sixth Dynasty, which the Sixth Dynasty was the last remnants of the Old Kingdom, and that's when the Old Kingdom faded away, and then it went into another period. And that period, we will get to that period in episode 10. Now, before I go any further, with this, I may have to, because we have like 4 dynasties in the Old Kingdom period. So that would be Dynasty 3, Dynasty 4, Dynasty 5, and Dynasty 6. So I may have to, because there's a lot of kings, especially in Dynasty 5. There's a lot of kings there. And Dynasty 4 is a good number of kings there. And so is in 3. Not as a whole lot in 3. I think 3 has like 5. At the end of Dynasty 6, it's not a whole lot. It's about 4, maybe 4 or 5 of them. But the 2 middle dynasties, Dynasty 4 and 5, have a lot of kings. So I may have to divide it into 2 episodes. Like this one, episode 9, I may just do Dynasty 3 and 4, maybe 5. And the next episode, Dynasty 10, I may complete the Old Kingdom, the last 2 dynasties of the Old Kingdom, which is Dynasty 5 and Dynasty 6. So I may split it up that way. So let's see how tonight go and see where it goes from here. So let's also, what I'm going to do too, we're going to go on a little break, not right now. And when we go on the break, I'm going to let you know that we're going to go on the intermission. So that's a great time for you to, either you have to get up and do some stretches, to, stretch out a little bit, or, you may want to go and get something to munch, or you may want to go and use the bathroom at that time, or just get something to drink, or just relax a little bit. That'll be a good time. Usually the break would probably be like 3 minutes, but I'll let you know. As I stated, I'm not going to play any music. I'm just going to keep things raw. I like it like this. I can do things, make it fancy and stuff, but no, I want to keep it like this. I like it like this. Um, and this is for historical purposes. We need to know this history of Kemet because this is our history. And too many times our people don't know. A lot of people want to understand Kemet, but they don't have either they don't have the time or they don't have the resources, whatever it is, or they just don't want to know their history. You need to know your history because your history is important. It is the fundamental guideline that give you the knowledge that you need in order to create a better present and better and prosperous future. You can't go forward if you don't know your history and what mistakes was done in the history and how can you in the present correct those mistakes, modernize it, and benefit it for your own benefit and your people. So that's important. That's something that we all should be doing. But let's go into it. Let's start out now. These are because I'm going to show you the first two kings of the third dynasty, and then the last three as I read on. Now, this is the first two kings of the third dynasty. Okay, so also too, if you want to leave comment of anything like that, please leave it because I will read your comments. If you want to talk about if we can go further into things or have a further or more deep discussion, we can do that. Let me know. But let's go into this. Dynasty 3 had started between 2686 BC to 2613 BC. Okay. Senakati was the first pharaoh of the third dynasty. He ruled from 2686 BC to 2668 BC. Then you had Dozer, who ruled between 2668 BC to 2649 BC. Okay. Now, Senakati, the first king of the third dynasty, Senakati, also known as Nebka, is little known despite a reign of some 18 years. Presumably, the foundation of the dynasty was cemented by marriage with the female heir of the last king of the second dynasty. The matrilineal nature of ancient Kemetan society being evident from very early times. Senakati is thought to be the brother of his famous successor Dozer, who became the second king of the dynasty and built the step pyramid at Saqqara. Both these kings began the exploitation in earnest of the mineral wealth, exploitations in earnest of the mineral wealth of the Sinai Peninsula, which was particularly rich in turquoise and copper. A fragment of a large red sandstone relief from the Wadi Makhara Sinai shows the figure of the king wearing the red crown of Lower Kemet and about to smite a foe, a posture that was already well established by the early dynasty. Okay. Now, Dozer, both Sennacherib and Dozer, with when he succeeded to the throne, apparently still had internal political problems to overcome. Those were probably managed to extend his rule as far south as Aswan, the first cataract, later the official southern boundary of Kemet. The name Doja, in fact, appears only in later records and may have been the birth name at the hold on. At the time he was known by the Horus name Netjer Netjeri Kut, the name inscribed on all his monuments, including his step pyramid complex at Saqqara. While two while the two names are associated together at the step pyramid, New Kingdom uh, geography there mentioned Doja. The earliest proof that the names belong to the same king comes from a long inscription on a large rock on the island of Salih at Aswan. The inscription is a the inscription is a Platonic forgery cut by the priest of the god Khanum of Elephantine and lays claim to some 85 miles, 137 kilometers, of territory south of Aswan known as the Da De Kasgani in the god's name, it having been granted by Doza, the priest of the goddess Isis on the nearby island of Philae. However, believed that Doja had given the land to them. Both claims were probably untrue, but each side eventually considered that Doja promise had some ancient and lasting vitality, endowing the king with substantial historical importance. The land grant was said to be in response to the local god Khanum terminating a 7-year long drought and associated famine. The tombs of officials from the previous dynasties had lined the edge of the plateau at Saqqara, looking out over the cultivation towards the royal capital of Memphis. Being low manabas, they appeared only as a series of low mounds on the skyline. Dozier decided to move his monument back from the encampment edge by about a mile, 1.6 kilometers, and there commenced a grandiose complex that was to be an architectural first, the famous Step Pyramid. The Step Pyramid of Saqqara. Today's Dozier's Pyramid and its surrounding mortuary complex is recognized as the first stone building in the world. Although stone had been used for certain features in earlier tombs, this was the first to be constructed entirely of stone. The genius who produced this vast monument for Dozier was his vizier Imhotep, who seems to have been a man of many parts. His high standing at court is indicated in the inscription on the base of a broken off statue of Doja, where after the name of the king, Imhotep's title reads, the treasurer of the king. Yes. The treasurer of the king, Lower Kemet, the first after the king of Upper Kemet, administrator of the great palace, hereditary lord, the high priest of Hercules, Imhotep the builder, the sculptor, the maker of stone vases. Okay, so let me show you that inscription here. Okay, this is where my finger is on. This is the inscription here. Okay. Also, let me show you of the step pyramids that they're talking about here. You see on the top there. All right. Okay. Hold on for a moment. Let me just do this quick. Okay, the whole concept of Dozier's funerary monument was that of an era for the spirit focused on the pyramid itself. This began life as a normal mastaba, but was subsequently subject to several major enlargements, adding one mastaba upon another, until it consisted of 6 unequal steps rising to 204 feet, 62 meters. Its base area is 358 by 411 feet, 109 by 125 meters. The substructure is a honeycomb of shafts and tunnels, several of them dug by robbers, which are difficult to distinguish from those original tunnels left unfinished. Vast quantities of stone vases were found beneath the pyramid, many of exquisite form and artistry, a number of them bearing the names of earlier kings. Perhaps Dozier added these vases to his monument as an act of pity towards his predecessors, to save their funerary goods as best he might. A mummified left foot found in one of the passages may be the only remains of the king. Other members of the royal family were buried in some of the shafts and tunnels, one being a young child of about 8 years old found in a fine alabaster coffin. The various enlargements of the ground plan of the pyramid finally meant that these other tombs were all sealed beneath its expanding structure with no access. A new entrance to the king's actual burial chamber, cut from Aswan granite and plugged with a 3-ton stopper after the burial, was dug from the north. Close to this northern entrance stands the Sahadab, Arabic for cellar, a box-like structure of finished Toro limestone with a pair of small holes pierced through its front-facing slope. This was found during the excavation of C.M. Firth and was a complete surprise. Within the serdab was a painted limestone, life-size seated figure of Dozier, the oldest royal sculpture of this scale from Kemet. It represents the king closely wrapped in a large white cloak, probably that used in the king's jubilee or Habset festival. Food offerings and incense would have been placed on a altar before the two small eye holes in the wall of the Serdab, enabling the Ka, the spirit of the king, to partake of the spirit substance. Whereas at the end of the day, the mortuary priest could enjoy the material substance of the offerings. The mortuary complex, facing the pyramid on the south side of the enclosure, is the so called South Tomb. Three carved relief panels set within the frames of its false doors show the king performing the Habset ritual in which he reaffirmed his fitness to rule. On one panel, he wears the tall white crown and a ribbed ritual beard as he runs the requisite course. This also serves to underline the wholly ritualistic nature of the entire complex that Imhotep created for his master. Okay, so let me show you uh, the Helen festival, which is right here. Okay, and I'm also going to show you the elaborate work. The picture of Imhotep is right here, and then you see the pyramids, inner structures of the pyramids. All right. Uh, okay. Let me go into the. Okay, hold on for a moment. I'm trying to think. Let's see. I do the third and fourth. I may just do the third and fourth today. Let's see. Fourth dynasty. Yeah, I may do the third and fourth. Oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the third and fourth, and then episode 10 is going to be the fifth and sixth dynasties. Okay, of the Old Kingdom period. All right, so let's get into this. It is believed that the South Tomb also served as the burial place for Doja Vessier, which were removed during the embalming process. With his mummy buried in the pyramid, the king thus fulfilled the requirement of having a northern and southern tomb, symbolic of the two lands of Upper and Lower Kemet. Between the south tomb and the pyramid lies a wide courtyard with a complex of buildings on the east side known as the Habset Court. Over the last 30 years, in particular, this court has gradually been restored. Like everything else in the complex, its structures are false dummy buildings, which made perfectly good sense since it was intended as the place of the spirit. The whole complex was surrounded by a high tenos wall of white limestone blocks in the form known as the palace facades. 13 faults or dummy doorways was set into it, while a 14th actually opened into the inner area. This doorway led into a long colonnade hall of fluted columns, none of which were freestanding, all of them being engaged into a supporting wall behind them. Emphasis, uh, em- uh, exemplifying the initial flattering steps of architecture in stone, taking over from mud brick and in imitating the organic forms of earlier styles. The fine fluting on the columns immediately recalls the Greek Doric column, but that comes almost 2,000 years later. This hall, in turn, opens on to the large court on the south side of the pyramid, containing two Jubilee festival altars whose bases only survived. Along the east side of the court are a series of three habsets, shrines of pavilions that face a narrower court which runs inside the eastern wall. Close to the southernmost Hajab shrine is a large podium with a pair of round fronted steps, which was the base for the pair of back to back tents with carved roofs that were an integral part of the Habset festival, and which in a ceramic form became the hieroglyphics that stood for the festival. These pavilions all have doorways, but they only penetrate the facade for a short distance and lead nowhere. Three unfinished, roughly blocked out standing statues of Doja have been placed to one side of this court. They show the king in ritual pose, wearing a Nemnes headcloth, Nemes headcloth, long beard, and holding the frail and scepter. To the north of this court is another whose dummy buildings once again reflect the division of the two lands. The first structure is known as the House of the South and has a styled cashier phrase over its doorway, a stylized protective fence, motif, which, like so many that first appeared in the early periods, continued to be used for centuries, if not millennia. The Ketfer phrase is particularly noticeable in the tombs of the 18th dynasty pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings. The House of the North is noted for its papyrus columns with large umbels, all of which are engaged in the supporting wall, but which also have the triangular sectioned papyrus stems reproduced correctly in the small limestone blocks later in the New Kingdom. This accuracy is lost in favor of large, heavily rounded columns. All right. Excuse me. The death of Doja. Doja was succeeded by Sekhemkeb in about 2649 BC after a reign of roughly 19 years. This scarcely seems long enough for the construction of a monument as remarkable as the Step Pyramid, but it is powerful testimony to the authority of the king. To build such a structure would have required a vast workforce, not to mention a strong government to organize and feed the workers. Dozier's funerary complex stands at the head of a long line of Kemetic stones architecture. Within it, many of the later buildings, forms, and styles are first seen admittedly in an experimental stage to be copied or refined over the next 2,000 years. Okay, so here are the last three kings of the third dynasty. So let me show you these. If you see here on the top here, the names of the last three kings of the third dynasty. According to Manetho, the remaining six kings of the third dynasty were of no account, although he gave them a combined total of around 157 regal years, regional years. Little is actually known of these kings now, generally, though to have been only three in number and with a joint reign span of about 36 years. Prior to 1951, virtually nothing was known of Dozier's successor, Set-Hemket. A relief in the Wadi Makhar in Sinai bears his name, although it had formerly been mistakenly attributed to Simriket, last but one king of the first dynasty. And evidence the military interests of the third dynasty pharaohs in the area. The last king in the relief is engaged in the age-old motif of grasping foes by the hair with his left hand and bringing a pear-shaped mace crashing down on them with his upraised right hand, the icon of smiting the dwellers in the desert. The Batu had already appeared in the first dynasty, and this is just one more instance of it. Information about Set-Khemeh increased dramatically. However, in 1951, when an Egyptian archaeologist named Sakar Golem discovered an unfinished step pyramid at Saqqara attributed to the king, the buried pyramid. In March 1951, Golem was appointed chief inspector of Saqqara. Intrigued by the fact that there was apparently only one third dynasty monument here, Dozier Step Pyramid, he carefully surveyed the site and its ground features. To the southwest, Dozier enclosure wall laid an oblong plateau of terrace recorded on the maps as a natural feature. Golem was suspicious of the quantity and distribution of fragments of worked stone, granite, limestone, and oblaster lying about on it. There was too much for the terrace to be natural, added to which there were occasional small outcrops of rubble masonry. So in late September of 1951, Ghana began to investigate one of these outcrops. His efforts revealed a rubble coursed masonry wall, which, when cleared, was found to be 27 feet, 8.2 meters deep, sitting on bedrock. Eventually, an enormous platform was identified roughly 1,700 feet, 518 meters, on its long axis, north-south, and 600 feet, 183 meters wide. This had formed a base upon which an enclosed wall of the palace facade type similar to Doja's had been built. This great work had been left unfinished, presumably because Sekhemket died after a reign of only about 6 years, shortly after construction had begun. Had it been completed, it would probably have risen in 7 steps to a height of around 230 feet, 70 meters, taller by the step, and 16 feet, 4.9 meters than Doja's step pyramid. The pyramid platform was especially well preserved on the north side, and it was formed here that a deep sloping rock cut trench was located, which led down to an entrance, a sealed doorway that was opened in March of 1954. Large areas of the entrance passageway were blocked by rubble debris, which was extremely unstable, dangerous, and difficult to clear. At the base of the blocking to the passage was found a small cache which included 21 gold bracelets and armlets, a hollow gold tube, and a exquisite small gold box in the shape of a bivalve shell, all apparently having been deposited together in a now perished wooden box. A large diorite bowl was nearby. The group seemed to have been deliberately placed where it was found rather than abandoned or dropped as robbers' booty. The name of the owner of the complex was revealed when 5 small clay jar ceilings were found impressed by a cylinder seal with the name of Sekhemket. Eventually, after clearing more of the dangerous blocking, a large cavernous, unfinished burial hole was reached, in the center of which stood a rectangular sarcophagus of translucent alabaster cut from a single block. Close examination of the area and various passageways nearby showed no evidence of robbers' intrusions after the tomb had been sealed. In June 1954, almost 3 years after work had begun, the sarcophagus was carefully opened, the sliding panels raised with difficulty because the original gypsum mortar ceiling held it tight in place. To the great astonishment of the invited audience of scholars and journalists, the interior was completely empty, and a shock to which there was no ready answer. The sarcophagus had definitely not been robbed. The only explanation possibly was that the king had been buried elsewhere, possibly even in the labyrinth passages of which many have yet to be explored. Okay, now we're going to talk about uh, these two kings that came after Sekhamawait. Okay, so we're going to talk about them. Before I go on, greetings, Clark Bozer. Thank you for joining our show this evening. Don't worry if you miss some of it. You can always check with the once this finished, you can go and check back and take a look. We are in the third dynasty, and I'm talking about the old kingdom, because in the old kingdom you had Dynasty 3, Dynasty 4, Dynasty 5, and Dynasty 6. And so in these old kingdoms, this was considered, as I mentioned before, this period was known as the pyramid. This is the period in when the pyramids were constructed during these dynastic periods, during the third and sixth dynasties. So this was the age of the pyramids of the old kingdom. So this creation was during the time of the old kingdom. Hold on for a moment. All right, so okay, so we're going to talk about Cabba and Huni. These are the other two kings of the third dynasty. Now, this is the third dynasty is the beginning of the old kingdom. And the pyramid building started in the third dynasty with the Saqqara pyramid, the step pyramids that was created for the second king of the third dynasty, which was Doja. And Imhotep played a role in that creation of that kingdom. Of that pyramid. Okay, the last two kings of the third dynasty did not use Saqqara as the royal burial ground. Sekhemkhet successor Cabba built his pyramid, the so-called Lair Pyramid, at Sawet el Aram, a mile south of Giza. This seems to have been intended as a step pyramid with 6 or 7 steps and a rock-cut entrance on the north side. Similar construction techniques and layouts to Sekhemkhet monument place it in a chronological sequence after his, and not in the second dynasty as had been suggested many years ago before the parallel evidence at Saqqara was known. Cabba name was recovered, written in red ink on several stone vessels from third dynasty mastabas close by. It would appear that the monument was never used. Huni, the fifth and last king of the third dynasty, made an even more drastic move for his burial site. He erected his monument at Maitum on the edge of the Fayum, 50 miles, 80 kilometers south of Cairo. Today, the pyramid mid rises as a grunt, almost Pharaohs like structure just beyond the edge of the cultivation. It was the first pyramid to have a square ground plane and was intended to be the first that was geometrically true. Loose packing stones were added to the steps before the whole was encased with white Tura limestone. Now it has three of an original seven tall steps at a step angle of 74 degrees and rises to about 214 feet, 65 meters. The present shape has resulted from the collapse of the outer skins of the casing in antiquity due to the lack of bonding between them. Exactly when this collapse occurred has been the subject of some controversy. Kurt Mental Lawson suggested that it took place during the building of the South or Bent Pyramid of Synephrine, the first king of the fourth dynasty at the Dashars, and that both pyramids were being built concurrently. Others believe that it was during the New Kingdom, since there are 18th dynasty visitors graffiti in the small east face mortuary temple. In the New Kingdom, the Medum pyramid was obviously thought to have been built by Synephrine, since the mortuary temple graffiti mentioned his name, referring to the beautiful temple of King Synephrine. This is clearly somewhat exaggerated, since it is a small plain and windowless structure with just the two large upright and round top funerary still, both uninscribed and unfinished, standing either side of a low altar in the small courtyard between the back of the temple and the pyramids, east face. Courtyard between the back of the temple and the pyramid made them at Doja, and it is highly unlikely that they would have had two, or unusual enough. It is now generally agreed that the Medum pyramid was built by Huni, but that it was basically finished by his son-in-law and successor Synephrine. Medum presents us with the first occurrence of what was to become the norm for the layout of a pyramid complex. This consists of the pyramid itself with an entrance on the north face, which gives access via a descending passage to burial chamber, normally located in the bedrock or at ground surface within the mass. There can be more than one chamber, and at different levels within this group. On the east face of the pyramid is a small pyramid or mortuary temple. From this, a causeway runs down to the edge of the cultivation where the valley temple is located. Very fine reliefs are usually a feature of a later example of these buildings. At Medum, the valley temple has never been excavated and is presumed to lie in a small cluster of palm trees at the lower end of the now much denuded crossway on the edge of the architectural land. Curiously, there is no, agricultural land, excuse me, correction. Curiously, there is no evidence of there ever having been a stone sarcophagus in the subterranean burial chamber. This had to this has led to speculation that the burial was made in the large unidentified mastaba number 17 on the northeast side of the pyramid, where there is a typical Old Kingdom uninscribed granite sarcophagus whose heavy lid has been eased to one side by tomb robbers. In two of the mastodite tombs, the tombs of nobles in the court of Huni, to the north and east of the pyramid, the French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette discovered in 1871 some of the greatest masterpieces of Kemetic art. The Madam geese and the pairs statues of Ra-Hotep and Nephri. Now you got to remember, this is kind of controversial because Ra-Hotep and Nephri, right? The Princess Nephri seated on it. These individuals were not royal. Okay, so these individuals, I don't know why. This is the image of one of them, the female, right? The Egyptologists assume that the Ra-Hotep and Nofret were rulers. They weren't rulers. These were people who worked in the court. They weren't rulers of this dynasty. So this is the confusion that happens here with the Egyptologists misinterpreting what the importance of these individuals in the third dynasty. These people were not kings. They were not rulers. And Ra-Hotep, in order to be a king of ancient Kemet, you had to have your own image of the king's name on there, which I have it in my family's coat of arms, which links me to Ramses III, which I'm a descendant of. But you have to have that. They didn't have that. So these people are not acknowledged as kings of Kemet. So I don't know why Egyptologists keep showing the pictures around the world with these two individuals, Ra-Hotep and Nephri, as if they were rulers of Kemet. But we're not going to go too far into that. We're not going to get into a debate part. Let's focus more on the historical factors here. Okay, so now let me go on further with this. The three pairs of realistic and beautifully painted geese on a frieze were found in the tomb of Nefer Mayat and Atet. The solemnity of the faces on the statues of Ra-Hotep and Nofret from their monosyllable contrast with the expression on the faces of lesser mortals. Here, confidence in their immortality by virtue of their connections is well expressed. Amongst Ra-Hotep's title is the king of his title is that of king's son. He may have been a son of Synephrine and his wife Nephret. was one known to the king. The 24 years or so of Huni reign ended in about 2613 BC, and with it, the third dynasty drew to its close. Okay, now we are going to go into the fourth dynasty. Okay, so I'm going to read what's going on into the fourth dynasty here. Okay, because we just finished the part of the third dynasty. Now, in the third dynasty, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of. Excuse me. That was the beginning of the pyramid, the building of the pyramid, the pyramid that's in Saqqara, the step pyramids in which Imhotep had helped build for Doja, Doja was the second king of the third dynasty. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to go back to this again. So, for those of you who's just coming in now, the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth dynasty is known as the pyramid builders. This is part of the. This is also known as the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom started in 2686 BC to 2181 BC. So this period is the beginning of the greatness of Kemet, from the pyramid building, centralized government, centralized strong economy, trading with foreigners, strong military, science, mathematics, architecture, artwork, the creation of the metaneter and the writings, and so on. Many great things happened here. So we're going to go into that a little bit further. So before we go into the kings of the fourth dynasty, we're going to take a 3-minute break here. So come back at, right now is 8:07 p.m. Central Time right now. So let's take a 3-minute break and come back at 8:10 Central Time. Well, 8:10 Central Time, 9:10 Eastern Standard Time, and 7:10 Pacific Time. So let's do that. Let's take this break quickly. I'm going to take a break now. Like I mentioned before, because I used to do it where when I took my breaks, I would play a little bit music. When I played a little bit music, YouTube had sent a warning that of copyright. So I don't play music. So if you hear any quiet, don't worry about it. I'm still here. I'm taking my break. So this is a good time to take a break, take a bathroom break, get something to drink or munch on, or go and stretch. This is a great time to do that. So let's do that. Let's come back in 3 minutes. Okay. very familiar to me. Okay, I am back. Thank you for being patient. I hope you enjoyed the little break that you had. We're going to go into Dynasty 4 right now. And the kings, the first two kings of Dynasty 4 was Synephrine, who ruled 2613 BC to 2589 BC. And then Khufu, the second king, he ruled 2589 BC to 2566 BC. And I'm going to show you them, and then you're going to see the cartouche right next to them. Okay, so these are the two kings of the fourth dynasty, and you see the cartouche. Every king of ancient Kemet have a cartouche that explains their right to rule, their name in the cartouche. So, okay, Synephrine. After the founding of the fourth dynasty by Synephrine in 2613 BC, more historical records and portraits of royalty have survived. Synephrine married the previous king Huni's daughter, Habset Court, who was to find great fame as the mother of Khufu. Manetho says, according to the Eusebius, that the dynasty consisted of 17 kings of Memphis who reigned for a total of 448 years. The Africanist version gives only 8 kings and 277 years. The kings of the third dynasty were also Memphites, but it is specifically said of the fourth dynasty that Although of Memphis, they were of a different royal line. It would appear that Synephrine marriage to Hune's daughter brought the two lines together, but it was a significant break in Metho's eyes to constitute a new dynasty. He identifies the first kings as Soros, Senefret, who reigned for 29 years, although present opinion is more in favor of about 24 years. Senefret was a son of Hune, probably by a minor wife called Menesenek. By marrying Hetep who presumably carried the royal blood as the daughter of a more senior queen, he consolidated his claim to the throne. Senefre was probably, therefore, Hetep half-brother. Hune is the last king of the third dynasty in both the royal canon of Turan and the later Saqqara lists. So basically here, the end of the third dynasty and the beginning of the fourth dynasty. So Senefre was basically the brother-in-law of the last king of the third dynasty, Hune. So he married his daughter, which is Hetep Heres, which branched the two dynasties together. But Senefre was not. You can't really say he wasn't related. He was related to a certain degree, but he formed a new dynasty, which was the fourth dynasty. So to solidify his hold to power, you marry someone from the old dynasty to give you a right to rule, to make your dynasty be efficient. This has been going on for centuries. You look at many dynasties around the world, some of them, to make them legitimate, they marry someone from the old dynasty, from the old blood. So this makes them legitimate in the eyes of the people, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is old practice. This started in Kemet. It's Okay, let's go on. There are records principally from the Palermo Stone of Senefre, expeditions beyond the boundaries of Kemet to the Lebanon to fetch the great cedar logs needed for temple doors and great ships, and to Sinai for turquoise. Although there is evidence as early as the first dynasty of expeditions to Sinai, Senefre seems to have become particularly associated with the era and was worshipped there as a god, according to a much later inscription left in the Wadi Makhara. Senefre also appears on two contemporary reliefs near each other in the Wadi, here given his full title and noted as Smitter of Barbarians. He is shown in the already age-old attitude of doing just this. Senefre moved the royal burial ground yet again, not back to Memphis, as might perhaps be expected, but to a new site at Dashur, 28 miles, 45 kilometers north of Medum. What governed the choice is not known, but he built two pyramids for himself there, and several kings of the later 12th dynasty were to follow his choice of site. The two pyramids of Senefre. Scholars have long debated which of Senefre's two pyramids at Dashur was the earlier. The current consensus seems to find in favor of the southern pyramid, vastly called the bent, blunt, or rhombolical pyramid because of its curious shape. The pyramid was associated with Synephrine in the Old Kingdom since a 5th dynasty inscription identifies an official as overseer of the South Pyramid of Synephrine. The explanation for this strange shape of the bent pyramid has been much argued. The German Egyptologist Ludwig Burckhardt, 1863 to 1938, suggested in his assertion theory that the king died suddenly and the pyramid's angle had to be radically reduced from the 54 degree 31 of the lower courses to the 43 degree 21 of the upper courses in order to finish the work off rapidly. This reduction, however, actually makes little difference to the volume of the structure and therefore the amount of work involved, added to which we now know that it was before the Northern Pyramid. Kirk Mendelssohn proposed alternatively that the pyramid at Meidum and the southern pyramid at Djoser were being built concurrently, not consecutively, and that a building disaster occurred at Meidum, possibly after heavy rain when the casing slipped, which caused the architect at Djoser hurriedly to change the angle of declination when the pyramid was half built. This theory is only acceptable if the collapse took place at the time of building and not later during the New Kingdom, as some evidence suggests. The bent pyramid is unique. Almost Old Kingdom pyramids is not only having an entrance on its north face, as is the norm, but also a second entrance that opens high up on the west face. The north entrance, about 40 feet, 12 by 2 meters above ground level, gives on to a sloping corridor that descends to two high corbel roofed chambers cut into the bedrock. From the upper of these two chambers, via a shaft and a passageway, another smaller chamber is reached, which also has a corbelled roof. This third chamber, with its unusual access corridor from the west face, was only discovered in 1946 to 1947. The rationale for having entrances on the north face of all the known Old Kingdom pyramids has a religious basis and is connected with the northern stars. Why there should be this one entrance, why this one instance of a second western entrance is a mystery. Like Meidum and the northern pyramid at Djoser, there was no trace of sarcophagus ever having been in place in any of the chambers. Synephr's name has been found in red paint in two places in the bent pyramid, and his association with the building was substantiated by the discovery of a still, the remaining of two of the kings inside a smaller pyramid within the enclosure. The valley building associated with the pyramid was excavated in 1951, 1952, and produced evidence of having been decorated with reliefs of superb style and finish, but sadly all had been badly smashed and wrecked in antiquity. There had also been statues of the king set into recesses, probably forerunners of the series of freestanding statues that existed in the Valley Temple of Khafre at Giza. The northern, uh, the northern or red pyramid at Dahlia is the first true pyramid, although the angle of its sides is slight, only 43 by 36 degrees, as against the later norm of 51 degrees by 52 degrees, and takes its subparent from the color of its stonework in the evening sun. Entrance is via a sloping passageway on the north side, which is located several feet above ground level, whence it descends to three consecutive chambers, all now rubble filled with incestable. This pyramid has been attributed to Synephrine on the basis of some casting blocks, which bears his name in red ink, and a inscription said to have been discovered nearby earlier this century. The latter is a decree of Pepe the First of the Sixth Dynasty, remitting taxes due from the priests of the two pyramids of Synephrine. It was probably in the northern pyramid that the king was buried. His wife Habset had her original tomb nearby. With such an obvious command of resources and manpower to be able to build two pyramids for himself and complete a third for his predecessor, Senefre had clearly consolidated the kingdom to such an extent that he was able to leave a strong inheritance to his son, Khufu. Menethil, Khufu was to take his father's achievements even further to the very upplay of pyramid building on the Giza Plateau. Okay, now we're going to go into Khufu, who is the second king of the fourth dynasty. Okay, now he went even further when it came to building pyramids. Okay, so I mean he really did a lot during his time. Now let me just give you a quick picture of the pyramids, and then you can see Khufu. Wow. Oh boy, let's see what we're going to do here. I'm just looking into something, seeing. Oh boy, we got a lot on the fourth dynasty. Fourth dynasty. All right. Hold on. Let me look at something here. All right. It's not that one. All right, hold on for a moment. Okay, yeah, let's go on. Okay. I don't know. I might I may read probably two more kings of the fourth dynasty and then go on to episode 10 and finish off the fourth and then do some of the fifth. Or let me know, uh, do you want me to go on further with the fourth and break it up? Or you want me to go on completely complete the fourth and then go into the fifth in episode 10? You can write your comments and let me know. All right, let's go on. Okay, the ancient authors through whom Menethel's works survive were all agreed that the third king of the fourth dynasty was Subsidiary, the builder of the Great Pyramid, which Herodotus says was built by Cheops. Subsidiary conceived a contempt for the gods, but repenting of this, he composed the sacred books which the Kemetans hold in high esteem. Subsidiary is better known by the Greek form of Cheops and the Kemetans form of Khufu. It is curious that Khufu should be placed third in line. There do not appear to be any other records of an intervening pharaoh between. Him and his father Synephrine. Okay, so let me show you this. This is a family tree of family tree of dynasties 4 and 5. Let me show you that. And then there's a pyramid underneath. And then on the far right, you see a statue of Himam, Khufu's master builder. The eyes have been hacked out by robbers and restored. Okay, so let me show you this. Okay, this is the family tree of the fourth and fifth dynasty. If you can see it. Then underneath you see the pyramid, and then you see the grandmaster builder of Khufu's pyramid on the right here. Okay. The reference to his composing sacred books is intriguing. These do not seem to intriguing. These do not seem to have survived in later literature, although Khufu's character was severely blackened by later chroniclers and strongly contrasted with the lives of his successor, Shephren Khafre, and Mycinthus Minaker. Like his father, Khufu probably reigned for about 23 or 24 years. Okay. And he too seems to have initiated military expeditions to the Sinai Peninsula. Rock inscriptions in the Wadi Makka record the presence of his troops in this region, no doubt for the dual purpose of keeping the Betuan in check and exploiting the turquoise deposits there. A now very faint inscription on a large boulder on the island of Elephantine at Aswan also indicates that the king had interest in the far south of the country, quarrying the fine Aswan red granite. The Great Pyramid of Khufu. Khufu's greatest achievement was the creation of a monument that was to be recognized as the first of the seven wonders of the ancient world and the only one now standing. The Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau, originally 481 feet or 146.6 meters high, now only 451 feet or 137.5 meters, having lost its top 30 feet. It was until the 19th century AD the tallest man made building in the world, a proud record held by a ancient Kemetan architect for 4,500 years. It is not known why Khufu should have turned away from the site of his father's burial at Delja, or indeed that of his predecessors at Saqqara. Suffice it to say that he did, and that he chose a stretch on the Giza Plateau to the southern west of modern Cairo. His work appears to have been the first on the site, and it is curious that he did not choose the highest point on the plateau for his pyramid. This area was taken by his successor, but one Khafre, and was to produce the optical illusion that his pyramid is therefore taller than Khufu's, which it is not. Khufu channeled all his efforts into the creation of a single monument rather than several different pyramids. Like its predecessors, the Great Pyramid underwent several changes in its internal arrangements, but its external structure and dimensions appear to have been set from the start. The chief of works is thought to have been Khufu's cousin Himon, of whom a powerful seated statue was discovered in his mastaba tomb close by his masterpiece. For all, excuse me, its magnificence, the Great Pyramid is still a puzzle. Herodotus was quoted some practical figures by the priests. It took 10 years to build the crossway from the Valley Temple to the Mortuary Temple, 20 years to build the pyramid itself, and the whole cost was in the region of 1,600 silver talents, according to an inscription pointed out to him on the side, or just over 5 million pounds, $7.5 million at present scrap silver pieces prices. Moreover, we do not know exactly how it was built. Theories about this vary from the use of a long ramp stretching out into the desert, which was continually lengthened and heightened as the pyramid rose higher, to a ramp that rose as it wound around the pyramid face, following each course upwards. Neither is very satisfactory, that at each is rather impractical in one way or another. Herodotus said that the structure had been built as a series of terrace raising blocks on all four sides simultaneously, with the use of contrivance made of short timbers. This approach was tested with some success by the late Peter Hodges, a master builder using short lengths of timber with a metal shroud foot, and it is certainly more convincing than the other theories. The internal layout indicates at least two changes in plan during construction. Initially, there was to have been a burial chamber deep beneath the surface of the plateau. This plan was then altered to incorporate instead a small chamber, now erroneously known as the Queen's Chamber, and unfinished within the pyramid bulk and about 50 feet above ground level. Exploration in 1993 by a small robot remote control camera up the south air tunnel from the Queen's Chamber have revealed a small door secured by metal bolts. There is no question of access because the door is so tiny, the tunnel being only 8 inches, 20 by 25 centimeters square. The results of further investigation are eagerly awaited. The final change was for the construction of the magnificent Grand Galley, 28 feet, 8 by 5 meters high, and closed by a corbelled roof which led upwards to a horizontal passage that entered the king's chamber in the heart of the pyramid. Here at the west end of the chamber was placed a large granite sarcophagus cut from a single block of Aswan granite. The sarcophagus must have been put in position before the chamber was roofed by 9 flat slabs of granite, each with an average weight of almost 45 tons. Because it is about an inch too wide to pass through the entrance to the ascending corridor, an early example of built-in furniture. The exterior of the pyramid was cased with shining white turret limestone, which was laid, as Herodotus rightly said, from the top downwards. This was largely robbed in the Middle Ages to build medieval Cairo. You know who did that. um, of course, the Great Limestone Mortuary Temple, 171 by 132 feet, 52 by 40 meters, that stood before the pyramids, east face. Nothing now remains except its black basalt floor. The Valley Temple that stood at the foot of the pyramid causeway has disappeared under the Arab village, although parts of it were observed in 1991 when new sewage was being laid. Around the Great Pyramid, principally on the west side, were located the tombs of the courtiers who hoped to serve their king in death just as they had in life. On the east side are the subsidiary pyramids of Khufu's queens. Legend had it as recounted by Herodotus that the central pyramid, 150 feet, 46 meters square, was a product of the enterprise of one of Khufu's daughters, whom he had placed in a brothel in order to raise more revenue for building the Great Pyramid. Now, see, there's something wrong with that because this was said before that Khufu had, in order for him to gain more funds to continue with the building of the Great Pyramid, he had placed one of his daughters in a brothel. That's not, uh, there's no proof of that. And I doubt that the pharaoh himself would do something like that to any of his royal children. They didn't go around and do stuff like that. No other pharaoh did that. So there's no evidence of that. So I think that's a miscalculation of the Egyptologists, misunderstanding what was going on. But let's go into that. Let's go into this a little bit further here. Okay. Brothel in order to raise more revenue for the building of the Great Pyramid. In addition to payment, the princess also asked each of her clients for a block of stone, which she used to build her own pyramid. Nonetheless, to say there is no evidence to confirm this story, although the pyramid does appear to be that of a half sister of Khufu. Yeah, you see what I mean? There's no evidence of that. So for now, let's just debunk that for now until further evidence proving it. But I like I said, if you studied anything of ancient Kemet, there's no mention of any like that type of behavior any pharaoh had introduced to any of their female members of their family. No, they didn't go around doing stuff like that. Okay. The first pyramid probably belonged to his full sister wife, and the third to another half sister queen, Hitnusen. Two remarkable discoveries relating to Khufu have been made in the vicinity of his pyramid. The first, found in 1925 on the east side, close to the causeway, was the tomb of his mother, Queen Habset, and the second, uncovered in 1954, close to the south face, was that of an intact wooden ship. The royal ship of Khufu during clearance work close to the south side of the Great Pyramid in May of 1954, Kamal el Malaki found a series of 41 large blocking stones with an average weight of 18 tons each, which had hermetically sealed a 101 feet, 30 by 8 meters long cut pit. Within it were the remains of a magnificent 141 feet, 43-meter long ship of cedar wood, too long for the pit intended for it. It had been carefully dismantled into 650 parts, comprising 1,224 pieces. After many years of patient restoration work by Hag Ahmed Yusuf Mustafa, who had also been responsible for the restoration of Hiptep furniture, the ship was presented to the world in March of 1982 in a specifically designed museum which incorporated the pit in which it had lain for 4,500 years. Not all the problems poised in conserving the ship have yet been solved by the Egyptian Antiquities Organization until they are the opening of a second sealed pit discovered near the first will be postponed. Recent tests have indicated that it also contains a ship, but not in such good condition. It is a remarkable quirk of faith that for all the grandeur of Khufu's pyramid, his funeral boat, and the splendid style of his mother's funerary furnishings, there remains only one tiny portrait of the king himself, found by Flinders Petre in the old temple of Osiris at Abydos in 1903. In a curious inverse ratio, we found that the smallest statue represents the builder of the greatest pyramid, while some of the finest multiple statues extant from the Old Kingdom represent the builder of the smallest of the Giza pyramids, Menkaure, fifth ruler of the fourth dynasty. All right, so I'm going to show you a picture of a sarcophagus that's in the Great Pyramid, and then there's a grand gallery of Khufu's pyramid. Show you that, and then his reconstructed cedar wood ship, and then underneath there is the tomb of Queen Habset and her furnishing. So this is his the sarcophagus that was found in his tomb, the corridor. Then his funeral ship that's over here on the top, and then the furniture of his mother. All right. Okay. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to end it tonight because the next I'm going to read about these two kings of the fourth dynasty in episode 10. So I'm going to finish off the fourth dynasty in episode 10. So you have, let's see, 1, 2. You have about, I would say, probably 4 more kings of the fourth dynasty. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to extend this with the fourth dynasty because this, like I mentioned, I'm going to do this with some of this because some of these dynasties have a lot of pharaohs. So I'm probably going to have to cut from one episode and extend it to another episode. I may have to create 2 episodes to talk about one dynasty. So that's what I'm going to do with Dynasty 4. So we're going to end Dynasty 4 in episode 10. And then episode 11, we begin with Dynasty 5. So once again, thank you for joining me here on the Royal House of Ra. I hope tonight's show was a joyful show to all of you here. Continue your support of my show. And until next time, we're going to continue from Dynasty 4 on episode 10. So thank you all for tuning in, and God bless and have a good evening. Take care and be safe.